So, in case you haven't heard, Tiny Toons Looniversity is going to be returning with its second season basically next week on March 8th. And apparently, this is going to be a bigger season than the previous one because, according to one report, now correct me if I'm wrong, but according to one source, what we're getting is the first half of season 2. Now, along with this, we're going to get a spring break special. Now, this is nothing new to, the Tiny Toon franchise, if you will, because back in the early to mid 90s, one of the last Tiny Toon, I guess you could say, features that was broadcast on primetime television and then later on released on home video and so on was Tiny Toon Adventures Spring Break. And basically what this was essentially was all the Tiny Toon characters going on a spring break vacation. Hampton's parents were also involved because basically Plucky and Hampton stayed with them because I think they had a condo or they had one of those homes or apartments, whatever they call it, to where they had they had a timeshare, if you will. They had a timeshare, so basically they stayed there where the others I think stayed in a hotel and whatnot. And the other thing that really made this very notable was it was a musical. But we're not talking musical as, okay, we lead into one song sequence and we just continue with the story, then another song sequence. No. When I'm talking musical, I'm talking about the fact that this was essentially a 44-minute or hour-long, depending on how you originally watched it or first watched it, basically with a 44-minute to hour-long TTV story. That's what it was. Now, TTV was known as Tiny Toons music videos, if you will. Essentially a parody, a take on MTV. But yeah, essentially, that's what the first spring break special back in the early to mid 90s was. It was essentially a 44-minute to hour-long special, which featured the characters on spring break, and basically certain segments would be parodies of songs have been have been heard on the radio and nowadays on places like Spotify mostly through the radio at that time throughout the decades. Some songs were parodies of songs from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, believe it or not. In fact, one of the more notable scenes was them doing a parody of Elmira doing the Free Willy thing and everything, and you have Babs singing a parody of Will You Be There. So that's basically what the original Spring Break special was. Now, I'm not sure what this one's going to be about. They haven't given any information exactly what this Spring Break special is going to be. Obviously, it's going to be different. A big takeaway, or big I guess you could say change from the original. But what it's going to allude to is up to interpretation right now. Like, what is going to be the plot points in this special, and mostly is it going to be a 45-minute special or hour-long special, as it will be seen on Cartoon Network when it gets broadcasted. We'll have to see. But obviously, like I said, one of the big takeaways from this revelation is season 2 apparently is going to be cut in two. It's going to be two halves. You're going to have the first half debuting on March 8th along with the Spring Break special. And then you're going to have the second half debut later on this year. Now, one of the things I've talked about when it came to Tiny Toon Looniversity was hoping that they would keep the melting gag or the lustful melt gag or trope, whatever you call it, in the series. Now, they did do that in the first episode with the dance secrets, between Buster and Babs and that silhouette of them in shadow on stage, basically dancing together, and then Buster is on top of Babs, head to head, if you will. He's upside down on top of her head, and they're holding hands, and then they just melt down into a combined puddle. I was glad that at least they're keeping that, gag, that trope, if you will, in the series. I'm kind of happy that they're doing that. But when I'm talking about the lustful melt, I'm talking about a character melting into a puddle of goop at the attraction or affection given to them by someone that potentially could be the love interest. Like, for example, if they want to go Fifi with Buster or whatever, do something where Fifi finally does that gag. Because if there's one character, or at least two characters that we know of from the main sixum, if you will, the main sixum, actually three characters out of the main sixum that never did that was, Hampton, Shirley, and Fifi. Buster, Plucky, and Babs, they did their share of the lustful male gag, but the other three didn't. So hopefully we'll get that, in the second half, not the second half, but the second season here, either in the first half or the second half this year. Hopefully we'll get that. But again, not a lot of information is out there from, an episodic from an episodic title perspective, what episodes are going to have what titles to them and what the synopsis is going to be. Obviously, Warner Brothers Animation, and Max and HBO, they're doing everything they can to keep that information a secret from a lot of fans. But I guarantee you, a lot of fans are hoping for certain gags that were in the original, certain tropes that were in the original series. I guarantee you there's a lot of fans that are still hoping for those kind of tropes and gags to show up here in Looniversity. Because if they didn't show up in the first season, then they're hoping that we'll get more of that in the second season going forward. Because you got to remember right now, Tiny Toons Looniversity was only greenlit for 2 seasons. Now, they could, make the announcement at San Diego Comic-Con that we'll get a 3rd season, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see what they do. But, right now we don't have much information outside of the fact that it's going to be split in two halves, 2 parts, if you will, that being season 2, and that the first half is going to culminate as well with a basically, I'm assuming, 45-minute spring break special. But but I'm assuming within the next week we should get more information, like what the title of the episodes are going to be, what the synopsis are going to be, especially with the spring break special. Hopefully we'll get more information about that as we move forward. But then again, it could be a total surprise to us because I look back at the fact that Jellystone season 3 came out of nowhere, and it much very much took a lot of fans that were supportive of it and didn't think it was going to come back. It took them by surprise. Happily so, because Jellystone is a unique series in its own right. So I'm assuming that what's going on here is they don't want to give too much away of what season 2 is going to be about, like what the stories are going to be about, what the special is going to be about, and so on. And if there is a season 3 in the works, if there is, they may not give much information out about that until the time is right, which I would assume would be San Diego Comic-Con if they were to give that information out. But, we'll have to see, what's up their sleeves going forward. But, I'm kind of happy that we're getting this second season. It's a lot sooner than I think a lot of people would have expected it to be, but I'm guessing the reason for this is so that when they do the second half, which I would assume is going to be towards the fall, it'll basically give them more time to make the necessary cleanups that they need for those episodes to conclude it, if that is the last season. But we'll see. But I just wanted to come out and talk about that, guys. Let me know what your